Without plants, life on Earth would certainly be much different. Through the chemical reactions that take place in their cells, plants form a foundation supporting life as we know it on Earth. With the input of solar energy, plants replenish Earth's oxygen supply through the process of photosynthesis, serving to regulate Earth's climate and making Earth habitable for many other forms of life. In the same process, the ability of plants to take in carbon dioxide gas allows them to produce carbohydrates or sugars and other chemicals that serve as a vital source of our food and clothing, shelter, and even cosmetics and medicines. Although plants serve as the basis for our survival, we tend to take their contributions lightly and have little concern for the health of plant communities which survive by nature of the biological relationships plants form with microorganisms, insects, animals, other plants, and their physical environment. All of these forms of life, living together in complex relationships, dependent on one another for survival, form a biological community or habitat. In this program, we will visit Santa Barbara County to explore one of the most unique and threatened biological communities in California, the Burton Mesa Chaparral, a natural wonder. One factor that makes Santa Barbara County unlike any other biological region in California is its geographic location near the center of the state. It is the convergence zone, or meeting place, for species of plants and animals from northern, southern, and eastern California. The Burton Mesa Chaparral is located in the northwest region of Santa Barbara County, atop a sandy mesa that extends about 3 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean on the property of Vandenberg Air Force Base to La Purísima Mission State Park, 12 miles from the coast. The Burton Mesa extends about 8 miles north of its southernmost point at La Purísima Mission. The original extent of the Burton Mesa Chaparral is estimated to be about 35,000 acres, but human development has chiseled away at the habitat, leaving a patchwork of approximately 12,000 acres, much of which is in small fragments or is in a degraded state from clearing, fire breaks, and use of off-road vehicles. More than 25 species of special interest plants occur in the Burton Mesa Chaparral. 10 or 11 of these occur nowhere else in the world. The species diversity in the Burton Mesa Chaparral is greater than that of neighboring biological communities, such as coastal dune scrub to the west, oak woodlands, scattered grasslands, and desert to the east, and other forms of chaparral to the north and south.
Hello. My name is Lindy Euler. I'm a biologist, and I study how plants, animals, and microscopic members of a community interact with one another and their physical environment. An ecologist would be a more precise term describing my profession. By studying how all of these life forms interact with one another, I explore ecosystems. Right now, I'm walking through the Burton Mesa Chaparral ecosystem. The first question that has to be answered is, what is chaparral? First, chaparral is a plant community that grows in a Mediterranean climate. A Mediterranean climate is characterized by cool, wet winters and warm, dry summers. Mediterranean climates are found in few other places on Earth, such as Southern Europe, Chile, and parts of Australia and South Africa. As a result, these places also have chaparral communities, but with different species of plants and animals. Right now, it's the middle of summer, so warm, dry weather is to be expected. A defining characteristic of chaparral plants is their ability to cope with this period of drought and higher temperatures. They do this in 2 ways. Most plants in the chaparral have evolved drought tolerance to get them through the dry summer months. For example, chamise, a classic chaparral plant, has tiny needle-like leaves that function to limit the amount of water evaporated from its surface. The thick, leathery leaves found in Shagbark Manzanita, Purísima Manzanita, coast live oak, and the rare Lompoc yerbasanta also function to limit the water evaporated from these plants. A second adaptation many chaparral plants have to cope with the dry summer months is their adaptation to fire. Once these plants die, the only way many of them can replace themselves is through a fire cycle. Unlike other ecosystems, many chaparral plants have seeds which usually germinate or sprout when they're heated by fire or exposed to smoke or water that contains the chemicals from ash. Chaparral's reliance on fire is a necessity. Without fire, many chaparral plants could not survive. Two final distinguishing characteristics of chaparral are related to the soil the plants grow in. Although not all chaparral soil is sandy, like we have on the Burton Mesa, it is generally nutrient poor. The nutrients are easily flushed out because they're unable to bond to the soil grains. Chaparral plants have adapted to this deficiency and can outcompete plants that require more nutrients to survive. The final distinguishing characteristic of chaparral is that the soil is generally well drained. I'll pour some water on the ground and you can see how quickly it percolates through the soil, leaving plants with little available moisture or nutrients.
The ocean has a strong influence on the Burton Mesa that gradually rises up from the coast. Cool ocean breezes blow inland over the Burton Mesa throughout the year, bringing with them cool, moisture-laden air even in the mornings and evenings of the warm summer months. The assemblage of species that make the Burton Mesa chaparral their home have become adapted to this coastal or maritime influence, making the Burton Mesa chaparral one of only several chaparral sites in the state known specifically as maritime chaparral. The distinguishing characteristic of maritime chaparral is the presence of plant species such as elderberry that rely on coastal fog in the late spring and summer months when the daily temperatures are at their highest. Maritime chaparral, then, is composed of plants that require a cool ocean influence to prevent water loss, as well as plants that can exist in drier environments. The Burton Mesa chaparral is truly a natural wonder when one considers that it contains more rare plants that are dominant elements of the vegetation than any other clearly defined plant community in California. The number of these endemic species per square kilometer in the Burton Mesa far exceeds that of desert regions such as the Grand Canyon, and even temperate forests found in Yosemite National Park and in other parts of the country. One of the only places on Earth containing more rare plants that are dominant elements of the vegetation are the tropical rainforests of the world, such as this one in Costa Rica. The Burton Mesa harbors over 250 native plant species, making this maritime habitat one of the most diverse plant communities in California. The geological formation of the Burton Mesa is an ancient and evolving story. Dr. Chipping, professor of geology at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, explains how the land formations present today came about.
We're standing here on the Burton Mesa. Mesa means a flat-top landform. We sort of associate the term mesa with the Southwest and Navajos and cowboy country. But in actuality, it means just plain flat. The surface up here is flat because it used to be the seafloor. The whole of the Burton Mesa at one time was just beyond the beaches. The waves would cut across it and sort of plane off the ground surface. This was a long time ago, and that land surface has now been uplifted as the coast ranges have been uplifted. This land surface was cut maybe 200,000 years ago. It was once underwater. It was then uplifted, and when the sea removed itself from the area and the beaches were further to the west, sand then blew in across this eroded wave-cut platform, as we call it, and this is the soil now of the Burton Mesa.
The early evolution of the Burton Mesa from its undersea past to its present tabletop landform can be observed in dunes found at Montaña de Oro State Park in Los Osos, about 60 miles north of the Burton Mesa. Although they do not harbor a complete maritime chaparral plant community, These dunes reflect what the Burton Mesa may have looked like in the distant past as the land was uplifted and the oceans receded further west. Although nature often appears static to us because we can seldom perceive noticeable changes occurring over short periods of time, what goes on in fact is an uninterrupted cycling of nutrients between various members of the ecosystem. As a result, the environment is changed by the action of different members of the community, many we cannot even see. The soil of the Burton Mesa Chaparral is continually in a state of change through the efforts of bacterial decomposition and a slightly more noticeable member of the community, fungi. It's often the life form seldom seen that we can't live without. To find out how important fungi are, we'll look under an oak tree during the spring.
Now, one of the hidden members of the community here are the fungi. The fungi are very responsible for actually causing a lot of the breakdown of the leaves into the soil. And indeed, there's another bunch of fungi called mycorrhizal fungi that link with the roots of plants and help the nutrients get into the plant. Indeed, some of these plants out here couldn't survive unless they had a very intimate relationship with soil fungi. Now, this is one of them right here. In fact, they're all over the place. It's just rained. It's nice and warm and moist in here. And this is the season when the fungi start growing. This is the so-called fruiting body of the fungi. The bulk of it is a bunch of fibers underground, and it's there year-round. But when it's nice and warm and moist, it puts up this little piece, the mushroom or toadstool, and the spores, which are the seed, if you like, for making new mushrooms, fall out of the underneath of this and are scattered in the wind and establish new colonies.
There is an amazing amount of biological activity occurring at the soil surface of the Burton Mesa Chaparral and even beneath the soil. What dynamic changes take place above the ground? For the most part, there doesn't appear to be too much change out here from year to year. As mentioned before, an essential component of any chaparral plant community is a reliance on fire. Without fire, a chaparral plant community slowly begins to lose plant species that rely on fire to trigger seed germination. In the absence of fire, these plants are less able to replace themselves when they die of old age. Even some animals that make the chaparral their home, such as the sage sparrow, are dependent upon a cycle of fire for their survival. As chaparral grows, it becomes flammable by producing large quantities of dry branches containing chemical substances that enhance combustion. In addition, chemical substances in the leaves of many plants slow their decomposition by bacteria, allowing dry leaf litter to accumulate on the soil surface as a fuel source. When fully grown, chaparral is remarkably flammable, making it one of the most fire-susceptible communities in the world. Buried layers of charcoal in ocean sediments from the Santa Barbara Channel indicate that major fires naturally occurred in this area about every 40 years. With temperatures reaching 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, the vegetation is converted to smoke and ashy material rich in nutrients. The ash remaining on the soil is favorable for plant growth. This new growth is vigorous, succulent, and colorful, in contrast to mature chaparral vegetation. A burned landscape seen from the air stands out from dense green vegetation surrounding it. There are a tremendous number of seedlings present within the first year of a burn in the chaparral. This is especially interesting because seedlings rarely occur at any other time. These annual fire-following seedlings come to life after their seeds have been laying dormant for as much as 50 years. The seeds of some plants have simply been waiting for the auspicious occasion when an open, sunny area is made available by a fire. Other plants, such as Manzanita and Ceanothus, have seeds which are triggered to germinate by fire, but these longer-lived plants produce seeds throughout their lifetimes. With the introduction of non-native ice plant, it is critical that these native seedlings establish themselves within the first year following a fire. Otherwise, ice plant may cover the area. Plants in the Burton Mesa Chaparral have evolved two strategies to reproduce following fire. The first is seen in Shagbark Manzanita, which has the ability to sprout new shoots from its base or burl. This enables it to maintain a secure position in the soil without having to rely on the more risky venture of developing anew from seed. Here we can see chamise, like Shagbark Manzanita, is a prolific burl sprouter too. In a similar way, coast live oak, with its thick, protective bark, is capable of sprouting new shoots from its charred trunk and limbs following a fire, as well as regenerating from its acorns. The second strategy adopted by chaparral plants to reproduce following a fire belong to the Obligate Cedars. These plants, like Parissima manzanita and both Santa Barbara ceanothus and Coast ceanothus, have lost their ability to resprout from a burl and instead produce a large number of seeds each year that require fire-related cues to germinate. These seeds are very long-lived, lasting until the next fire occurs. Bishop pine is another plant associated with the Burton Mesa Chaparral, whose survival is dependent upon fire. In the presence of fire, the cones of bishop pine are stimulated to open, allowing its seeds to fall to the ground. The old pines die, and a new generation of young pines burst into existence. The season in which a fire occurs can have a dramatic influence on the ability of chaparral plants to regenerate following a fire. Gray, with the California Native Plant Society, explains why.
In some areas they're doing prescribed burns nowadays. In chaparral, you might have heard about this. This helps with fire safety. You can plan it better. And one of my problems, and I've been trying to get people to talk about it more often, is that prescribed fires are only safe during the wintertime, right? When everything's wet and lush and you can get a handle on the fire more easily. That's bad news. That's not when fires have happened normally. December, January, the soil's wet, there's a fire comes through, and that seed bank that's in the soil that's spurred on by a certain amount of heat down there isn't used to the heat from a fire in the wintertime that can carry that heat deeper in the soil. And it basically steam sterilizes the soil, kills the seeds, and it also kills another important component out here, which are fungi in the soil. And this is really, really, really poor soil. And the way that these plants get by in this poor, dry soil is interactions with mycorrhizae, with fungus in the soil. And when there are fires in the wintertime, that fungus is all lush and in the soil. It's not used to fires happening. That also kills that fungus. And without that fungus, nutrients can't get from plant to plant. This fungus carries, say, there's coyote scat decomposing over here. It'll carry those nutrients from that coyote scat for, yeah, I'm just pretending. it'll carry the nutrients from decomposing scat many, many meters. That the nitrogen from that scat might go over to that coffee berry way over there, where the roots don't reach that far. Most chaparral roots don't have root hairs. This is another thing. You dig them up and they have these clumpy looking roots without any fine parts to them that you're used to seeing. Instead of root hairs, it's got mycorrhizae that go right into the cells of the root. And maybe one fungus will cover 300 acres of ground, one individual fungus. And it's transporting nutrients from every corner of its fungal mat to every other corner. So, controlled burns are favorable when the soil is dry because the seeds and fungi are insulated from the intense heat penetrating far into the soil. Chaparral burning on wet soil during the winter months has the potential of steam sterilizing the soil, destroying the native seed bank and fungi beneath, making these areas incapable of recovery after a fire. The local Chumash Indians were aware of the effects fire had and intentionally burned vegetation to stimulate fresh plant growth
to be used for food and basketry, as well as to increase the abundance of game animals, such as rabbit and deer, who prefer fresh, succulent new growth. If you were to walk through the Burton Mesa Chaparral, you would quickly notice it's not the same wherever you go. The abundance and distribution of plant species is unique within the Burton Mesa Chaparral. Like humans, there are many factors which influence the way development occurs. One reason why the Burton Mesa Chaparral community varies in its species composition and growth form is because of stand age. Stand age refers to the time since the last burn occurred. All plants in the chaparral have different life expectancies and rebound from fire at different rates. This stand of ceanothus or mountain lilac is an indication that a fire occurred here more recently than where you find areas dominated by manzanitas and coast live oaks that may not have burned for 40 years or more. Two other factors that influence growth form and species composition are the compaction and depth of the soil. In western locations of the Burton Mesa, we see a dwarf form of chaparral. The dominant plants here, manzanitas, Santa Barbara ceanothus, and chamise, have established themselves on very shallow soil. Although they're capable of growing much taller, their physical stature has been reduced by the soil depth in their environment and not their genes. In areas of the chaparral where the underlying soil is heavily compacted, the brilliantly blue Santa Barbara ceanothus is favored. Another factor that influences growth variation in the chaparral is slope aspect, which is the direction on a slope the vegetation is facing. South-facing slopes are exposed to more direct sunlight during the day and generally dominated by plants that are able to tolerate more heat and dryness, such as chamise and manzanita. North-facing slopes receive little or no direct sunshine and remain cooler throughout the day. These areas often support chaparral plants of tree-like or arborescent stature. Also, factors such as soil nutrients and the distance from the ocean are figured into the complex equation that determines the variation in abundance, distribution, and growth forms of the plants in the Burton Mesa Chaparral community.
Now, standing here with a backdrop of Burton Mesa Chaparral plants, the manzanita, coastal sage over here, oak over here, the monkey flower over here, a whole bunch of wonderful things. We wonder, of course, of why this plant community is different from plant communities elsewhere. Well, it turns out that the soil plays a very major role in this. There are not a lot of places in California that have wind-blown dune sand as the soil. As that is very nutrient poor, a great number of these plants that sort of start the community going are the plants that can handle that kind of condition. It's not a lot. As the places where this condition occurs are very scattered along the coast of California, there's some at Fort Ord in the Monterey Bay area, there's some at Los Osos near San Luis Obispo, there's some near Nipomo, but nothing in between, then that's going to cause little islands of these plants to exist in isolation. The insects that pollinate these flowers can't carry their pollen to the other distant areas, and therefore they can't mix their genes. The plants therefore kind of evolve as a little group all by themselves, and they end up becoming different over time. Different features start developing in the plants. They're not better features, they're not worse features than the features developed by another community, say up near Los Osos, but they're different. And gradually the manzanitas begin to look different from each other, that sort of thing, until eventually you get total separation of species. Species that look totally different, and they become the endemics of the area.
Maritime chaparral contains more rare endemic or native plants that are dominant members of the community than any other plant community in California. The most extensive maritime chaparral in California occurs on the central coast from Vandenberg Air Force Base to La Purísima Mission. The Burton Mesa Chaparral is well known for its concentration of endemic species with very narrow distributions. It is this concentration of endemic species that makes the community unique. The woodiness, or hardness of a plant is another characteristic feature of dominant chaparral plants. Although most of the species of the chaparral community are not woody, but are herbaceous understory plants, the woody, stiff-stemmed shrubs are dominant in terms of size. 4 woody species, 2 manzanitas and 2 ceanothus, characterize the Burton Mesa Chaparral community. Shagbark Manzanita derives its name from its shaggy red bark, has tiny lantern-shaped flowers, and manzanita, or little apple-shaped red berries. Its leaves are held away from its stems on a petiole. Purissima manzanita, with similar flowers and berries, has leaves attached directly to the stem without a petiole. Unlike shagbark manzanita, Purissima manzanita is not capable of sprouting from a burl following a fire, but rather relies on seed germination. 2 species of ceanothus, or mountain lilac, also characterize the Burton Mesa Chaparral. Santa Barbara ceanothus is brilliant blue and is often found in areas with shallow soil that has typically burned within the last 10 years. More common is the longer-lived coast ceanothus, with lavender to white flowers and found on deeper soils. Although not limited to the Burton Mesa Chaparral, coast live oak is another woody dominant species found on the Burton Mesa. An unusual characteristic of this tree on the Burton Mesa is its ability to form multiple trunks from a single base. Research has not yet determined why this growth form occurs on the Burton Mesa. Most people are familiar with the acorns of the oak, but few recognize its male flowers or catkins in full bloom. The herbaceous or soft endemic plants in the Burton Mesa Chaparral form the understory beneath and alongside the dominant woody vegetation, and are the first plants to establish themselves in open areas following a disturbance such as fire. The herbaceous plants found only on the Burton Mesa include the lompoc bush monkeyflower, lompoc wallflower, fiddleneck, lompoc yerba santa, and Blockman's larkspur. Many other species of woody and herbaceous plants with wider distributions are found on the Burton Mesa. Because of this great plant diversity, many unique species of animals have made the chaparral their home. Some of these include the soil-dwelling legless lizard, horned lizard, a variety of snakes and birds, coyote, deer, and the elusive wood rat with only its nest as evidence, and many others. These days, few natural places on Earth are free from the threats of degradation and destruction by humans, who at the same time strive to understand and preserve these places for future generations. This irony is no less apparent in the case of the Burton Mesa Chaparral, where many are trying to ensure the preservation of the land, while others will continue to seek opportunities to alter the landscape. Less than 1/3 of the original Burton Mesa Chaparral remains today, and much of this has been fragmented or degraded by 3 major forces. The first is the introduction of non-native plants such as ice plant, annual grasses, and the insects such as the European honeybee and Argentine ant, all from other parts of the world. The second major threat is habitat destruction by human development, agriculture, and off-road vehicles. And lastly, fire suppression and control burns in the winter when the soil is moist may continue to prevent fire-adapted species such as ceanothus and manzanita from regeneration. We will take a brief look at some of these factors.
Here in California, we've got 6,000 species of native plant and about that many non-native plants, but there's only a few handfuls of non-native plants that are serious threats to native plant communities. Over in Vandenberg, I understand, ice plant is taking over, and it prevents anything else from growing. It prevents seedlings from getting established. And these are complex interactions. I happen to know the ice plant story pretty well. Ice plant gets loose, people plant it in their yard, and then rabbits come and eat the seed pods. It used to be called Hottentot fig because the Portuguese got it from South Africa. and they would pickle the seed pods that look like, or in the insides look like figs. They're really sweet, they have a lot of vitamin C in them, protein-rich seeds, and the rabbits really like them, and ground squirrels really like them as well. They're a summer water source, and they're a good protein source, so where these ice plants grow, a lot of rabbits are able to live from this food source. And then the rabbits then spread the seeds around farther and farther from the ice plant, and then the ice plant feeds more and more rabbits, and the rabbits go out from these edges of the ice plant and mow down the native vegetation. Anything that tries to establish, the rabbits and ground squirrels just mow down and make room for more ice plant, and it's a deadly continuum. So ice plant just keeps any chaparral from regenerating, and then there's a fire and the ice plant comes back and nothing else does. Big problem.
Non-native grasses also pose a great threat to the native plants of the Burton Mesa. Non-native grasses interfere with the establishment of native herbaceous or non-woody understory plants, annual wildflowers, and native grasses. These short-lived non-native grasses also increase the frequency of fire within the chaparral because of their tremendous dry biomass above ground. California became the golden state with the introduction of annual non-native grasses that die back each year. Native grasses typically occur in bunches and are perennial, meaning they survive and remain green more than 1 year. Native grasses have deep roots and therefore serve to prevent erosion. California's native grasses are severely threatened by non-native grasses, such as the giant pampas grass, South African veldtgrass, and numerous annual species from other parts of the world. The introduction of non-native insects is another major problem concerning the health of the chaparral. Although the introduction of non-native species can seem benign, the effects are often hidden to us.
People plant a lot of different plants and then also have bees. They have honeybees, and honeybees have just destroyed Californian wild bee populations to the point of maybe making many of them extinct and endangering others. We don't have enough entomologists to really know what's happening there, but we suspect that's the case. Our European honeybee is really aggressive and chases bees away from flowers that it's using for nectar and making us honey. So it's like you know about human impacts out there, and you kind of see that there's some weeds that we've introduced that are in here causing havoc, but you don't see where the real biodiversity crunch is out here, which is our little drones, our bees are coming out here and chasing off the diversity from their food sources.
Development is the most obvious factor that threatens the survival of the Burton Mesa chaparral. Here we can see the situation more clearly from Dr. Chipping's vantage point.
This is Burton Mesa Chaparral, and this isn't. This is Vandenberg Village out here. And of course, human development is a very obvious threat to the Burton Mesa Chaparral. That is, all these houses are sitting where Burton Mesa Chaparral used to sit. If housing developments come in and sort of patch their way over the landscape, we will get what we call fragmentation of the habitat. That's big words, but what it basically means is the little pieces become disconnected from each other, and that means that the animals can't run from section to section and the pollen can't get from section to section. And basically the fabric of the plant community and the animal community that lives in it begins to fall apart. Another great risk here is, of course, from fire. This is a fire-adapted community, and if we build houses right at the edge of a fire-adapted community, we might then expect those houses to burn. So there's an added impact. People say, well, not only do we want to live in the Burton Mesa Chaparral, but we want you to take a whole bunch of it away around where we're living. So the impact of houses in the chaparral is in fact much greater than the size of their yards.
The threats to the Burton Mesa chaparral are great, but the key to improving the health of this fragile ecosystem lies in the education of each member of the community. The Burton Mesa chaparral was described in botanical literature beginning in the early 1960s. The County of Santa Barbara recognized the importance of this unique and diverse habitat in the 1980s with Unocal Oil Company's dedication of a 200-acre Burton Mesa preserve. In 1988, Santa Barbara County commissioned an analysis of potential Burton Mesa Chaparral preserve sites to be located between Vandenberg Air Force Base and La Purísima Mission. In 1991, Unocal Oil Company dedicated over 5,000 acres of its land holdings that support Burton Mesa Chaparral to the California State Lands Commission, with the condition that the unique habitats on this property be preserved. In 1996, the state of California acquired another 960 acres of land west of La Purísima Mission. These preserve sites are predominantly Burton Mesa Chaparral, but they are also home to coastal dune scrub, oak woodland, bishop pine forest, wetlands, and small areas of native grassland. Beginning in the 1980s, many groups and individuals, as well as Santa Barbara County government, have worked to educate the public regarding the importance of this botanically unique habitat. The Santa Barbara and Lompoc communities, as well as statewide interests in preservation of California's botanical heritage and diversity, has resulted in the establishment of this extraordinary preserve. Long-term planning for the management and preservation of the Burton Mesa Chaparral are the goals of the state of California and will only succeed with the support of local groups and individuals. It is the responsibility of all of us to become involved and educated about the patterns and processes in the natural world in order to ensure its preservation for future generations. Come, experience the Burton Mesa Chaparral and find out for yourself that it truly is a natural wonder.